The training hall echoed with laughter as a young recruit sneered at the woman standing quietly in the corner. Her face bore scars, silent witnesses to battles already fought. But when the instructor asked for her call sign, the room went still. The recruits, who moments earlier mocked her, now found themselves staring at a name whispered with respect across battlefields. The training hall smelled of sweat, leather, and dust. Fluorescent lights hummed above, illuminating a line of fresh recruits shifting nervously in their boots. Some whispered, others fidgeted, their eyes darting toward the doors as if expecting a commander to storm in at any moment. And then she walked in. Her steps were steady, deliberate, almost too calm for the room filled with restless energy. The woman wore the same fatigues as the others, yet something about her presence set her apart. The scars etched across her cheek and jaw caught the eye immediately, drawing a mixture of curiosity and discomfort from the young men and women already gathered. One recruit, tall, cocky, with a grin that spoke of arrogance rather than confidence, leaned sideways toward his buddy. Loud enough for the group to hear, he muttered, "Guess they're letting anyone in now. Must have scraped her off the battlefield." The hall rippled with stifled laughter. A few recruits smirked. Others exchanged uneasy glances. The scarred woman didn't flinch. She simply took her place in line, her face unreadable, her back straight. But the recruit wasn't done. He gestured with his chin toward her scars, voice rising with false bravado. "Hey, you sure you're in the right place? This isn't a hospital recovery ward." More laughter followed, this time louder, sharper, the kind of laughter that feeds off cruelty. Still, she said nothing. The instructor at the front of the room, a grizzled veteran with eyes that had seen more than he cared to remember, let the mockery continue for a few seconds longer. He didn't intervene immediately. Instead, he studied the woman's silence, the way she absorbed the sting of their words without reaction. The recruits thought they were in control of the moment. They thought they had found an easy target. But in truth, the silence belonged to her. The scarred woman's gaze swept slowly across the line of recruits, not with anger or shame, but with the quiet patience of someone who had already lived through storms far worse than insults. When the laughter finally died down, a strange unease lingered. Some recruits avoided her eyes. Others looked at her scars again, but this time with an unspoken question. What kind of battles leave marks like that? The instructor clapped his hands once, sharp and commanding. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. "Enough chatter," he barked. "This isn't a playground. You're here to prove you belong." His gaze shifted deliberately to the scarred woman. For a moment his tone softened just slightly. Then, with deliberate weight, he asked, "Call sign." The woman straightened, her voice calm, steady, and carrying a resonance that silenced even the boldest recruit. She spoke a single word, and in that moment the hall froze. The word left her lips like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through the room. Valkyrie. The call sign hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. The kind of name that didn't just identify someone, it carried history, weight, and whispered stories of battles most of these recruits had only read about. The cocky recruit who had mocked her seconds earlier blinked, his smirk faltering. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again, as if the very syllables had stolen his breath. A hush fell over the hall. Even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed quieter. The instructor's eyes narrowed, studying the shifting faces of the recruits. He didn't explain the name, he didn't have to. Every soldier, even those fresh from civilian life, had heard of Valkyrie. The legend of a soldier who had dragged wounded comrades out of burning vehicles under enemy fire. The one who had taken down insurgent strongholds against impossible odds. The one whose scars weren't trophies, but survival marks earned in the kind of battles that turned ordinary men into ghosts. And now she was standing in front of them, not as a myth, not as a distant war story, but as their fellow trainee. The instructor finally spoke, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Some of you think scars are weakness," he said, his eyes briefly flicking toward the cocky recruit. But every line on her face was written in blood, smoke, and fire. Each one is a story of survival, and of others surviving because of her. A few recruits lowered their heads, shame flickering in their eyes. Others stared at her with newfound respect, struggling to reconcile the woman they had mocked with the living legend standing before them. Valkyrie didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or throw back their words with sharp replies. She simply stood as she always had, calm, quiet, unshaken. Her silence carried more authority than any boast ever could. The instructor let the weight of the moment linger. Then he barked again. "Line up! Drills start now." As boots shuffled across the floor, the recruits found themselves glancing at Valkyrie again and again, as if trying to memorize the face of the woman they had just underestimated. The cocky recruit avoided her gaze altogether, his arrogance drained, replaced by the uneasy realization that he had laughed at someone whose name alone could command silence on a battlefield. And Valkyrie? She simply focused on the task at hand. For her, this wasn't about teaching them a lesson. It wasn't about pride. It was about survival, preparing the next wave of soldiers who would one day need to understand that scars are not shameful. They are proof. The recruits didn't know it yet, but from this day forward, every time they heard her call sign, they would remember this moment. The silence, the weight, the humbling truth of what it meant. The drills began. Boots pounded against the floor in unison, the recruits moving through push-ups, sprints, and combat stances. But the usual chatter, the grunts, even the occasional jokes that broke tension in a training hall were gone. Silence clung to the air, broken only by the sound of breath and discipline. And every so often, their eyes returned to her. Valkyrie executed each drill with precision, her movements deliberate but never exaggerated. She didn't need to prove anything. Not to them, not to herself. Each scar on her skin was proof enough, a permanent record carved into her very being. The recruits began to notice something strange. The scars didn't diminish her. They magnified her. The cocky recruit who had mocked her struggled through a set of push-ups, his arms trembling under his own weight. When he glanced sideways and saw Valkyrie pushing effortlessly, her eyes fixed forward, his cheeks burned. The laughter he once threw at her now felt like stones tied to his chest. At the break, the recruits gathered near the benches, sweat dripping, lungs burning. Conversation flickered to life again, but softer this time. "Is it really her?" one whispered. "Yeah, Valkyrie. My brother told me about her unit. Said she pulled 3 people out of a wreck while half the squad was pinned down. I thought that was just a story. It's not." Valkyrie sat alone at the end of the bench, quietly hydrating, her eyes distant. Not avoiding them, but not inviting them either. She had long grown accustomed to this reaction. The awe, the whispered legends, the shift from ridicule to reverence. The instructor approached, his boots striking the floor with measured authority. He stopped before the recruits and let his gaze sweep across them. "Let me tell you something," he said, his voice steady. "Scars aren't reminders of weakness. They're reminders of what it took to keep moving. Some with guilt, others with respect." For the first time, they began to understand what it meant to stand in the shadow of someone who had already walked through fire. The cocky recruit, unable to bear the weight of his earlier mockery, finally approached her. His voice was low, hesitant. "I didn't know. About you." Valkyrie looked at him. Her gaze was steady, unreadable, but not cruel. "You don't need to know my past," she said quietly. "You just need to learn from it. No lecture. No scolding. Just truth." The hall remained quieter that day, the recruits carrying an unspoken lesson with them. That strength isn't measured by perfection, but by the scars we carry and the weight of the names we earn. And from then on, whenever the call sign Valkyrie was spoken, silence didn't come from ignorance or mockery. It came from respect. Her gaze was steady, unreadable, but not cruel. "You don't need to know my past," she said quietly. "You just need to learn from it. No lecture. No scolding. Just truth." The hall remained quieter that day, the recruits carrying an unspoken lesson with them. That strength isn't measured by perfection, but by the scars we carry and the weight of the names we earn. And from then on, Whenever the call sign Valkyrie was spoken, silence didn't come from ignorance or mockery. It came from respect.